Good morning and welcome to this REC webinar entitled Strength from Adversity, Deriving Positives from the Negative. My name is Richard Charnock and I hope you can all hear us clearly. Please can you let us know using the text box for questions on the right hand side of your screen. We will attempt to answer as many questions as possible today during the webinar and are due to finish just after 11. If you wish to ask questions, please use the text box provided and we will try and answer them all. If we can't, then we will ensure they're covered in the follow-up email with the slides and poll questions. 85% of participants from our recent COVID-19 webinars say they're tackling isolation by holding regular virtual meetings with their individual teams. However, fewer than 44% agreed that they were circulating information and exercises to promote well-being amongst their workforce. Therefore, we're taking the topic of mental health and well-being one step forward. In this week's webinar, we're talking to an expert on occupational health space to address this topic and specifically asking our panelists to share their experience and lessons from their own careers. By the end of this webinar, you'll take away the knowledge and practical tips you can start rolling out with your team straight away. We're joined today by Paul Jacobs and Howard Greenwood from Love Work Life. Their consultancy provides ethical support to help drive both business and personal growth. Paul has spent over 40 years in the recruitment industry and is the former managing director of Office Angels. Howard has spent over 25 years in the industry and has a proven track record of managing businesses, increasing both their revenues and profitability. Also joining us today is Dave Pye and Bradley Plax from TwoAugment. TwoAugment are business consultants and strategic advisors to the recruitment industry. Brad and Dave work in a non-exec advisory capacity with their clients, both in the UK and abroad. Dave is well known as MD and CEO within the industry and is presently a non-exec director of both recruitment and technology businesses. Bradley has been in the recruitment industry for over 25 years as a recruiter, business director and non-exec director. Bradley is better known to you all as the founder of Broadbean. Also joining us today is Chris Allen. Chris is an experienced mental health and wellbeing occupational health advisor. For over a decade, he's been working with the wide breadth of organizations and a diverse range of businesses on mental health strategy and training. Chris is qualified and experienced mental health first aid training instructor with a BSc honours focused in occupational health. Let me turn to you first, Chris, if I may. We're 4 weeks into the current lockdown with an extension expected to be announced. What are the most frequent concerns your clients come to you with for advice or guidance?
Yeah, thank you so much. So as you say, we're 4 weeks in now and things have, for many of us, have never been busier. I just want to see if I can real quick just give you some perspective right now about what people are coming to me with, what people are talking to me about, and what I'm talking back to them. So these conversations, they're all starting really around this fear, this uncertainty. When you live in an uncontrolled state like we very much are now, the fear unleashes thoughts, doesn't it? And you can find it really difficult to think about how you're going to possibly turn this whole thing around. So what I'm talking to people about is controlling the focus, and it's what we feed our mind with. So if you're looking at the news and you're seeing pain and suffering and death, and then after that comes the economic forecast, and that's dire too. And then soon after that comes the weather, and then you can say to yourself, well, it's going to be sunny tomorrow, but I can't go anywhere because of this lockdown. And then you're looking at social media and you're looking at one story after another, and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and scroll all the way through. And now we find ourselves with this limited attention span, and it's fed with bad news. So then if I say to you that I want you to feed your mind with some positivity, then one of the books that I referenced in the course that's coming out is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And he's someone who lived in a concentration camp, but he found a way to get out and give back to the world after living through the most horrific circumstances imaginable. So if you've heard the phrase, you are what you eat, well, the same is true for what you feed your mind. And it's never been easier to do that now because you've got innumerable books and podcasts, and you feed your mind with these wonderful thinkers, these fantastic opportunities that are right there out there for you, with the greatest thinkers of our time. They're on hand and delivering this sort of value for free. It's right at our fingertips. So that's really the first thing that I've been talking to people about the most. It's about controlling what comes in. And the second thing is about the body, and we've got to feed and strengthen the body. And if you think about what this fear, this uncertainty is conjuring, at its core, it's really the fight or flight response. So what I'm saying to people again is give the body what it needs, this fight or flight response. So, you know, we're talking about exercise, and fear is a very physical embodiment of danger. So how do you turn that around? Well, there's plenty of workouts that are going on out there. I've been doing this Joe Wicks exercise classes with my kids every day. And what I would invite you to do is really to try and push through those last 5 minutes of your workout and force your way through, and you can break through that fight or flight response, give it what it's looking for. The third point, so that was the second one, that's feeding and strengthening your body. And the third point is really to find a role model. And if you believe that there is a pathway to what you want in life, and you can find a role model, and you can look back through history if you can't find one right now. But it's, you know, once again, it's easier than ever. So that's find a role model, and hopefully that role model will be able to prove it to you that it's so. Let's just say, for an example, mental health. You want to improve your mental health through meditation. Well, if you found a role model out there who's able to show you how to do it, maybe you're looking at the different apps like Headspace, and you can't decide which one to use. You've got Headspace, you've got Calm, you've got loads of podcasts. You've got Russell Brand out there preaching the virtues of meditation and all these sort of things. Don't wait to find the perfect one for you. Just start, just do it. And if that one doesn't work, then do a different method tomorrow. So that's the third and the fourth really is role model and plan. Begin a plan and just start, get it done. And the fifth thing that I'm talking to people the most about is changing your state. Because when you live with this sort of fear, this worry, this anxiety, and all of this uncertainty about what's going to happen in the future, it's really difficult to think about the positives. It's really difficult to think about what we're grateful for. And so maybe what I would like to leave you with is to just take a moment to notice perhaps what you're taking for granted, perhaps what you're really lucky about. And then take a few moments perhaps to express gratitude for that. This is what I'm talking to people about the most. How can you maybe help another person? Is there an opportunity out there for you to reach out and help other people? Maybe someone who's less well off than you, maybe someone who's in your community who's perhaps a little more vulnerable. And these are the sort of things that we're talking about the most, really. So it's if we go back to the beginning, the first point I made was controlling the mind and controlling the fear. The second one was about exercise and strengthening the body and using exercise in order to get out this fear, this uncertainty, this fight or flight response. The third one was about finding a role model. So if there's a method or a way that has always been interesting to you, and I use that example of meditation to improve one's mental health. And then the fourth point was plan, just do it. Find a plan to do it. Find a method for meditation, if we're going to run with that example. Find a method that you think will work for you. And if it doesn't work, just keep doing it. The important thing is commitment. Being committed to improving your mental health and taking action for that. But it's not always possible to overcome the fear. The fear can always be there. And if your entire financial circumstances, you're not sure what's happening in the future for you, then the last point I was making was about changing your state and just trying to change that record. Take the record off the deck, the one of fear, the one of uncertainty, and then try and reframe your focus onto something that's perhaps a little bit more positive, things that you're grateful for in your life right now. So just try and get away from some of this uncertain fear and worry. And that's where I've been doing most of my conversations with people. I have been unbelievably busy since I really wasn't expecting this, but I mean, none of us were, but I have been unbelievably busy with people reaching out for help and support. So it's great to give back. But they're the main things that we've been talking about the most recently.
Thank you, Chris. That's fascinating. When you were talking about a role model, Captain Tom Moore jumped into my head, and he's in the news all the time. Second World War veteran, and he's raised over, I think it's over £12 million, which is just phenomenal. Whilst I might look at him as a role model, I'm not sure I can set my sights at £12 million. Thank you for that. What I think I'd like to do now is get a bit of feedback from the audience, if possible. So we've got a poll question that is going to come up on screen shortly. And then if you can, if the audience can click on all of the relevant, use the screen and click on all of the relevant areas that apply to yourselves, that will be fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, there's some great advice there, some great, really, really good stuff, Chris. And it's fascinating because we take mental health for granted often, and it's come into the press and the news more in the last couple of years, but particularly now. So that's great. Thank you very much. We'll just give everybody a few moments to complete that. Can I just say to the speakers, I'm getting quite a lot of background noise. So can you ensure, please, when not speaking, you are muted? Thank you. We don't want to be deafening our listeners. We're going to change the format slightly. For those of you that have listened into the webinars before, we're going to ask one overarching question and then get each and every one of the speakers to give some experiences from their careers and talk through the topics. I think we're coming close to the poll questions. Let me just check. How are we doing on that? Yeah, I think we can close the poll now, please. And just so you're all aware, you'll see these slides and there's two poll questions. You'll see the slides in an email either out this afternoon or tomorrow. But it is interesting to see the results there. There's no one overarching point in that. Sorry, move my screen around so I can see it. So there's no one overarching step that people are taking. It is basically looking to me like there are lots of different steps that people are, and it makes sense because people are all individuals. Great, thank you for that. That's very insightful. So let me move on then, please. And I'm going to ask the panelists. We've already said we're a month into the lockdown, and everyone's coming to terms with the rapid changes and adapting to how we do business. But one thing that's come through is that leaders are telling us that they're really struggling to cope with the current circumstances, and it's taking a real toll on their own and their team's mental health. It's challenging to keep morale up and initiate those difficult conversations whilst overcoming the stigma around this subject. Can you share any insight around how leaders and individuals can support one another and look after their mental well-being? Let me turn first of all to Bradley, please, if I may.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's staying safe and well at the moment. Interesting question. Couple of things that I've taken from the question, that mental health is having a real toll on business leaders as well as their teams, and also around the stigma as well. So if we look at being a business leader, being an entrepreneur, there are so many benefits to being fortunate enough to run a company, but equally, at times, it can be one of the loneliest jobs in the world and one of the most stressful jobs in the world, because so many things fall on your shoulders. And now is a case in point with the pandemic we're going through. Never before has there been so much stress upon so many. You also mentioned the stigma around mental health. I'm with you. I think you alluded to it before you asked the question, Rich, that the conversation around mental health is out there so much more than it ever has been. Although I do believe we're probably still only scratching the surface. And that stigma is a real difficult one to move, because it means people need to start opening up and sharing their vulnerability and their stories, and recognizing that it is okay to not be okay and not feel they're going to get judged. If we think about our job as recruitment, we all recognize the following phrase: people buy from people. And what you want from someone is authenticity. And I've spoken before in the past about the need for us to develop our relationships in a more meaningful way. The more authentic we are, the more honest we are, the more transparent we are with our staff, with ourselves, with our clients and candidates, I think we can develop a stronger relationship longer term. If I may, I'd like to share my own story around mental health and some struggles I've had before in the past. I was very fortunate as a young kid. I came from thankfully a very stable background, started my career and had some early success. I was fortunate enough to start and exit a couple of businesses, and I'd never had any issues or really knew too many people that had issues around mental health. But my world changed a few years ago, and I call it my 3Ds: divorce, depression, and discovery. And like many people out there going through a divorce, it's a difficult time, and unfortunately, my world collapsed around that. All of a sudden, it felt like World War III had descended upon me. And I really struggled with it, and the actual process of dealing with the divorce was one thing, and I'm not going to go into that. That's just, it is what it is. But after I'd gone through that, what I was left with, the impact of it, the after effects, caught me like a truck steaming into me. And before I knew it, depression had stuck its arms around my neck and was absolutely strangling me. And I was in a real bad place for quite a long time, real dark place. And I felt so lonely and so isolated, even though I had so much love around me. And I didn't work for a couple of months, and I needed some help. And thankfully, I had enough about me to recognize I needed that help. And I went out there and got some counseling and got some therapy. And the discovery bit was so powerful. And what came out of the healing process was my desire to really want to help people. I looked at the situation I was in and thought to myself, I've had a fairly stable life. I'd had some level of success from a business viewpoint, and then this thing has wiped me out. And what about people going through it where there's kids involved that just don't have a stable background or don't have as much security, whatever, going on in their life? And I thought I really want to be able to reach out and help those people. So I went and did an initial course in counselling and therapy and got an initial qualification in that. And it was one of the most powerful things I've ever done. And through that process, the self-discovery, the self-reflection, it really took me down the path that I'm doing at the moment and looked at my own purpose. And what I realised in the past is the things that I've been most proud of was when I know I've had a real impact on somebody's life, somebody's career, and really helped them develop. And it made me think that I'd want to build a business around that. And my whole purpose with what I do at Augment is to work with leaders and their leadership team to help them be the best version of themselves in order that they can create the best version of their business. And I needed to get through the feelings I had through the depression and recognize that it wasn't just me that it was happening to. It was happening to so many different people. And actually, the more we talk about it, the more we realize that we're not alone. There's people that are struggling. They're struggling in silence. And if we're brave enough, and it is a really difficult thing to talk about situations that have affected you so personally, but if you are, you'll probably realize that so many other people can resonate and relate to your particular story. And actually, by sharing it, it helps them as well. And where we are now through the COVID-19 crisis, I think there's some similarities that we can draw from the experience that I went through. The loneliness and the isolation I felt at that time, even though I had people around me, consumed me. And I was more worried about the things that I couldn't control than the things I can control. And previous to any trauma in my life, I was really quite certain from a business viewpoint, if you focus on what you can control and try not to worry about the other things, you're going to be on the best path. But it's not as easy as that. Some things, life events happen. And as I say, this consumed me. And I was too worried about things I had no control over. And that's where I needed some help. And I think maybe many businesses are in that position at the moment. There are certain things you can control, and there are certain things you can't control. Be naive to turn around and say it's easy to not worry about the things you can't control. If it was that easy, no one would have any issues. It's far from easy. It's difficult. But one of the things, if we recognize, if we need help, actually ask for it. How do we remove the stigma around mental health? Well, part of it is actually taking a bit of responsibility ourselves and putting our hand up and just say, yeah, I could really do with some assistance. And whether it's deep-rooted depression, whether it's just feeling a little bit of anxiety and stress, it's irrelevant. Whatever impacts you is impacting you and having an effect. And the more we're open to sharing that with people, the more we can possibly recognize that others might be suffering, and then we can ask them more pertinent questions. You go to someone and say, hey, how you doing? Versus, how are you? It's the same question, but said in a different way. And if there's more meaning, sincerity around developing relationships, I think that can go through your whole business from the way you interact with candidates and clients, because it isn't just ourselves and our teams that might be having some issues and struggling in particular at the current moment. We have to recognize, and I don't know if enough people are talking about this, but all of our candidates and all of our clients are also experiencing many similar feelings as well. And I think if we can build a business around kindness and compassion, which we've spoken about before, if we can show empathy and understanding, I think it helps define our purpose. I think it enables us to work towards removing some loneliness for some people in the current climate and reaching out and being there to support them. I think if we recognize that it's okay to not be okay, I think we can have more open and honest questions, conversations. And if it shows that authenticity, I actually do believe with that level of authenticity, we can develop a relationship that's far more meaningful than you might have had before. And so to use the title of this webinar, Strength from Adversity, we are in difficult times. It's far from business as usual. I do believe there's some opportunities out there. They are harder to come by the day, but there are still people doing some business out there. But we are all more resilient than we think we are. And if we recognise the fact that others are struggling and we just talk about it in an open way, no matter how hard it is, I think you'd be amazed how supportive people can be. And outside of this webinar, I'm more than happy to in more detail about some of the stuff that I've been through before in the past and how I came through it, if it potentially would help someone. And just know that you're not alone and you can reach out to people and you'll be amazed with the amount of people that do want to help you.
Thank you, Bradley, and thank you for that honesty and frankness around your own personal experiences. I'd just like to reassure the listeners that if they would like to ask a question, those questions are not seen by everybody present. And so I would ask the question on your behalf to the panelists, and I can assure you that I will ensure that there are no names attached to it. It's just the contents of the question. So on this particular topic, if you feel that you would like to ask a question, but you would like to remain anonymous in that question, then please do ask it using the question panel, and I will ask it on your behalf with no names attached, so it will be anonymous to all the speakers and all the audience. So again, thank you very, very much for that, Bradley. Let me turn to Paul now, please. Paul, would you like to share some of your thoughts and experiences?
Yes, good morning, everybody. I hope you're all keeping well and safe. So I think the first thing to acknowledge is just how tough this is for everybody. That's leaders and colleagues. And the fact is, just because you're a leader, and it doesn't make you exempt from the stresses and pressures that everybody else feels. You're not superhuman. None of us are superhuman. In fact, the opposite is true. We're entirely and absolutely human. And we all suffer from the same anxieties and doubts as those who follow you, with just one major difference. Our problem as leaders is we are not allowed to demonstrate our anxieties to other people, the people that follow us. We have to be strong, we have to be resilient, upbeat, optimistic, assured, even visionary, and we definitely have to be humorous and appear to be invincible. At least that's what we have to try to portray externally. You know, the old adage, leaders have followers, managers have staff. And I think that's never been truer than today. The first thing to think about here, and I'll pick up on Brad's theme, is you need to be kind to yourself. So, you know, acknowledge that you're entitled to feel low on occasions. There's nothing wrong with that. I've already said you're a human being, you know, you're not a superhero. And I think the second point, acknowledging that you have to be kind to yourself, means that you also need to be kind to other people. And just to pick up on Brad's point, you need to find somebody you can confide in, someone you can really trust and unload to, and seek their counsel and their listening abilities. Someone that really will take the time and trouble to stop and listen to you. It's very important, not just in this kind of situation, but I think in just about every situation, when things are good and when things are not so good, having someone that you can trust as a trusted advisor is absolutely an imperative. During this sort of period, particularly, you really need to upscale your communications with everybody in your team. So those are the guys that are on payroll, still the guys working for you, and of course, those people who are furloughed. And remember, it's cathartic to be proactive. It's totally soothing, I think, to talk. It's healthy. It makes you feel better. So my advice is don't internalize, and certainly don't catastrophize. And I've found in my life, it's always the things that you can't possibly anticipate, the things you can't imagine that are going to happen, that hit you hard, knock you over, just like what we're going through right now. No one could have anticipated this. Almost never the things that you constantly worry about, the things that keep you awake at night, those things almost never happen. So, you know, where you come to, I think, is why worry? Because if you can't see the things coming that are going to have an impact on you, you can't conceivably imagine, why worry about those things? You can't imagine them, you don't know they're coming, so there's nothing to worry about. And the things that you can control, the events that you can anticipate, well, if you can deal with those things proactively, don't worry about them. I think the moral of the story is don't worry if it's possible. Now, I have to acknowledge, in picking up Brad's point, that that's a very difficult statement to make. And it's an internal fight that we all have. I'm a worrier by nature, but I really, really work very hard at trying to contain that, because it's a waste of energy. It's debilitating. It's both mentally and physically debilitating. And I think it's important to seek out activities and people who make you happy, who make you smile and give you joy. I made a conscious decision some time ago to banish negative people from my life. I guess you can do that with your friends and colleagues, maybe not your family, but you should try really hard to surround yourself with positive, upbeat people. It's particularly true in business. As a result, I think I have a great life. My professional life is invigorating and stimulating and a lot of fun. It's not without a high degree of hard work, but my energies are at least directed into positive, forward-thinking activities. I'm not worrying or feeling that I'd like to commit some kind of physical harm to a colleague. It's probably not a good idea. And talking of physical, I'm just picking up the point, whilst it's very difficult at the moment to exercise, if your only form of exercise is constantly walking to the fridge, well, that's bad news. So you've got to exercise every day, get those endorphins flowing. It's great for mental well-being, as we all know. So I've learned, just to pick up some examples here in my life, that when I've experienced really low points, and trust me, when you reach your 60s, as I have now, if you haven't experienced some broken bones and bruises over the years, in essence, you've failed to live your life. And I've emerged stronger and more confident, I think, from some of those downtimes. I'm very aware of my mistakes and my failings, and I've definitely got my share of baggage like everybody else, but I think the truly amazing things that I've enjoyed and achieved in my life have emanated from low points. And I know this sounds all a little bit oogie-floogie, what I'm about to say, but once you open your arms to the universe and cease to worry, if you work on that, and really just place one foot in front of the other with kind of a sense of faith that somehow, everything somehow is going to work out fine. The incredible thing is it actually often happens. Not only things working out, but actually life-changing as I've experienced. And I'll just share a couple of examples with you from my career that I just hope underlines that point. Some years ago, in 1990, I was made redundant during a recession. I was a young board director at Hayes. It was really hard to find a similar senior role elsewhere. So I was notified on Wednesday that I was being made redundant. I knew it was coming. I left the company on Friday. And on Monday, I phoned absolutely everybody in the recruitment world I could conceivably think of that from a long handwritten list. At 10 a.m., I contacted my old boss, Joe, who I'd worked with for many years at Alfred Marks Bureau. 10:30, Lawrence Rosen, who was the managing director of a brand new company called Office Angels, called me. I was standing in my dressing gown in my bedroom, I remember, and he said, "Can you get up to Wells Street in the West End to see me at 12 o'clock?" So I raced up there. I had hair in those days. I think it was still wet. And I sat in his office and he offered me a job as a branch manager, which was about half the level that I'd been on and certainly under half the salary I was earning. But I had 2 young kids, I had a mortgage, and I would have shoveled chips in McDonald's if I'd have had to do that. 10 years after joining them, after being promoted to area regional manager, regional director, business development director, marketing director, board director, I was running the business. I was the managing director. And it was a business with 200 million turnover, 650 staff eventually. And all of that happened because of an absolute low point at that time. In my early 30s, made redundant, sitting in my car, having been informed, tears running down my face. But 10 years on, I was running maybe the most famous recruitment business of its time at that time. And I found myself in another situation 10 years ago where, having been headhunted out of Office Angels, I joined a business which they conveniently forgot to tell me was insolvent during the 6 months that interviewed me. And I had to try and save the business. And within 5 months, we had to go into voluntary administration, and I had to hawk myself around various companies looking for money, £3 million to be exact. I found £3 million from a venture capital business, and we reset the clock and started again. I learned a very important lesson during the 5 months of trying to save the business, which was absolutely horrendous. I mean, I hardly slept during that time. The thing I learned most was 3 words: communication, communication, and communication. I had a small team of people. Most of the time, I didn't know I could even pay them at the end of the month, let alone myself. But we had daily short goals, constant huddles. We celebrated even the most trivial successes or victories. There were lots of hugs, lots of day laughs, mostly at myself, I might add. We made quick and very decisive decisions, mostly right, and I had to do that with very limited data or information, very short goals every 2-3 hours, creative solutions and ideas. We had positive, loyal and driven people, and they shared my values and behaviours. And above all, I think, and somehow an unerring belief that somehow we'd get through it. And I'd add, and this is a Jewish word, a lot of chutzpah as well, just thrown in for good measure. It didn't come without a share of pain. Trust me, I was trying to save 70 people's jobs, and my own. So a lot of sleepless nights and long days. But we did it, and I had to go around London doing the Dragon's Den thing, trying to raise £3 million, absolutely no inhibitions, desperately trying to raise money, which, as I said, I managed to do. What did I learn about myself? Well, I learned that I was stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. And in my head, I became a warrior. I felt I was a lot smarter than my secondary modern teachers ever gave me credit for. And I discovered that in a period of adversity, I actually was an outstanding leader, if I say it myself, rather than a great leader and an exciting, funded, growing business. Something that I'd not experienced before. I'd not been in that position of adversity leading people. And it's still something I feel very proud of. Most people, I think, can shine when all the stars are aligned. But I think it's about how you behave when the odds are against you, when you really find out whether you're made of the right stuff. And then on top of everything else, a bit like Brad, I went through a divorce, and I also decided to set up my love, work, life business. So all of that was happening pretty much at the same time. But it's been life-changing because I've got myself a great business. I've married a wonderful woman. I'm very, very happy. And I'm a grandparent, and so on and so on. And sometimes people say to me that they admire the way that I changed my life in the last 10 years, as if I'd actually planned it. The truth is that I had to experience lots of pain and stress during this period, mostly unplanned, but consciously I decided that the circumstances wouldn't defeat me. And I think I drew upon my fighting instincts, just placing one foot in front of the other. And I think you've got to think to yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen? You fail. Was that terrible? Isn't it better to try and fail than never to try at all? And then you ask yourself, what's the difference between success and failure? In my mind, they're intertwining strands of rope, and you have to have them both. You can't have one without the other. Life's all about ups and downs. And you have to understand that everything must pass, both the successes and the failures. And the failures tend to go pretty fast too. Importantly, enjoy the moments of joy and know that failures pass quickly. The huge plus, I think, is that having endured real challenges, you actually emerge a whole lot stronger. You become much more grateful for the simple joys that life offers. And you get a sense that almost anything you now have to deal with, almost anything, can't be tougher than what you've already been through. And not only survived, but actually grew older and wiser and prospered as a result. So I think we're all experiencing a once in a lifetime, hopefully, situation. And I urge you to use it to reevaluate yourselves, not only yourselves, but your businesses. Reinvent them. Come through this adversity having gained a great deal of great experience and strength. And I think maybe in time, this period of time could be a catalyst that you need to achieve, that will help you to achieve unimaginable fulfillment and success. The trouble is we just don't see that at the moment. Importantly, I think in time you'll share my view that if you get pushed down, but you keep getting up and moving forward, you can't be defeated. So it's important right now to be upbeat and believe in your future. Believe that you can be at least 1% better than everybody else, and be prepared to put in the hard yards as well, because success, as we know, only comes through sweat and graft and learning from mistakes. You can't buy experience, so you've got to go out and earn it. But once you've got it, wisdom and counsel, give it to the people around you. Be positive, happy, you've got to be upbeat, you've got to be resilient as leaders, intelligent, empathetic, and confident. And it all starts with you, and you pass it on.
Thank you, Paul. That was fascinating. And I mean, such a demonstration of getting back up when you've been knocked down and not giving up and persevering is that's just a phenomenal experience. And thank you for sharing it with us. Let me move us on, and maybe I can turn to Dave now for you to share some of your experiences, please, Dave.
Yeah, thank you. And really, you know, to Brad and Paul and how to come, it's fantastic to hear their stories, because I think it's the honesty that is coming through that we can all learn something from. I've got a story that's slightly different, but nonetheless has affected me in many ways. And as I was thinking about this webinar and the things to say on it, I was trying to apply the things that I went through to what it's like for you as leaders sitting there today facing with this disruption that this terrible virus is causing us and our businesses and the people that work for the businesses. My stories, some of you who know me may know it, but I've had a situation where I just was very lucky. Like Brad had a great family upbringing, and was building my career in recruitment. Like most of us in recruitment, I kind of fell into it and really enjoyed it. Was fortunate to have some success. I had built with two others a business that eventually got sold into what was Software Personnel back in the IT recruitment days. That business then got absorbed into Spring, which became the UK's largest IT staffing business. And I had gone from running a 4-person office in London that we'd opened for Intertech, that got built, that was sold, and then 11 years later, more by luck than judgment, I think, or ability, find myself as the leader of Spring IT. And I'd built my career, I was very happy, but what I discovered was I had a personal tragedy that happened in my life. And in 2005, my 4th child, Billy, was born. and very sadly, he died at birth. And it was one of those things that was so shocking for us, for my wife and I, and our 3 younger children, that you just can't imagine what to do. And you do whatever you think is the right thing to do. You cope with it in whatever is the right way. But it's also one of those moments, those jolts, that pauses, that causes you to pause and reflect. And I looked at, there was me building my career, climbing that career ladder. And I had that moment of thinking, after all this time, that ladder has been leaning against the wrong wall. I had success. I had 3 very wonderful children. I had a loving wife. I had, supposedly, I had it all. And something that is very important for me, the most important thing to me, I'm a committed Christian. I have a Christian faith. I became a Christian at 18. And I had that as well. And yet still in all this thing happened to me. And my focus was work and obviously my family as well. But really my ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. And how I relate that story to what we are all going through in our different challenges that we face today is that what it focused me on was my sense of purpose. Why am I here? Why am I doing what I'm doing? What is it that I should be doing or could be doing? And I wasn't sure that I had my purpose right. And in the time of reflection, which took a long time, it wasn't just a few days or a few weeks or a few months after Billy died. It was one of those, well, what's my purpose? What am I about? And I realized that my purpose wasn't just about, well, I'm here to build a good business. That is a product. That is something that I do. It's something that I really, really enjoy. But a little bit to what Brad was saying, what I realized is I love to serve people. And out of what happened with Billy was the bit about serving people, helping people who are perhaps less advantaged, but also helping people in business to find their sense of identity and their sense of purpose. And the lessons that I could perhaps sum up for this time for us in this period of disruption is, if you can see this as just a different time in your life. Yeah, this is a humanitarian event. It's not a financial event. It's something that's happened. It's going to carry on for a little while, even as we get into the recovery stage. But if you have that sense of purpose in your life, professional purpose, personal purpose, whatever it is, hold on to it. Because this disruption won't be forever. It's just a different phase that each of us are going through, that actually many of us have come together in it. And there's been some benefits from us because we've come together in it. But for now, you've got a new rhythm. The rhythm may be a little bit slower, but it's just for now. For me, afterwards, when we lost Billy, I needed a routine. I needed to get up in the morning to find myself I've got kids to look after. I've still got to take some time out from work, which I did. But I needed a routine. And there's a lot of stuff in social media about have a routine. And I think that's important. But what's also important to say is that if you don't have a routine and that doesn't work for you, don't beat yourself up about it. It's okay. If a routine works for you, fantastic. If it doesn't, but what you're reading is everybody has a routine and I don't, well, that's okay, because that may not work for you, and that's all right. Chris at the very beginning said, look after yourself, and certainly that was true, because for me, in a time where I felt depressed, I felt I was very much being challenged, it was a real struggle to get up and do some exercise. It was very easy to slip into bad habits. Goodness knows, we spent 3 weeks alone, and I think somebody had said that they opened the fridge and they've got a suntan just from opening the fridge so much. Easy for me to say, but actually I can just encourage you to remain or become healthy, because it will have a hugely positive impact on your mental health. When I lost Billy, I cried more when I was running than I ever did when I was in the house. I cried a lot with the family and the kids, and we cried together, we talked together, but actually it was during my exercise that I was able to just expend all the emotion that I was building up that kind of hit me at all sorts of different times. The other thing was to find time to talk to others, to family, to friends, to your business colleagues, to your advisors, your trusted advisors. Don't just become the center of it all yourself. Reach out, because that can really help with anxiety. Stay connected with people. Yes, we're connected on Zoom and all of these Microsoft Teams and GoToMeetings and all this sort of stuff. But don't forget the value of a good conversation. When we think Zoom, often we're thinking work, but actually try just to think about the value of a good conversation and good friendships. And as Paul said, it is okay to be a little bit anxious. It's okay to be a bit overwhelmed. As I went through my own personal disruption, I was anxious. I was asking myself, well, what could I have done to make sure that Billy didn't die? What happens if it happens again? What happens if it happens to one of my children? And it was really important that I learned to acknowledge that those feelings were real, that they were how I was feeling at the time. But once I gave myself the permission almost to feel anxious and feel a bit overwhelmed and recognize it, it was easier to deal with. So I would just encourage you to find a purpose, go back to that purpose and build on it in this time. It is a time that we will get through, and we will come out the other end, and we'll be faced with different challenges as we recover with our businesses. But this is just a different time in our lives, and I think together we can get through it.
Thank you, Dave. And I'm sure the audience would like me to pass on our sympathies for your loss in the family. But thank you so much for sharing that with us and your advice. Let's now turn to Howard and for your thoughts and comments on the overarching question, Howard, please.
Yeah, morning all. I hope all's well. I think listening to obviously Brad, Paul and Dave, there's a lot of synergy between what we're all saying and the processes that we've gone through, from being in some very, very dark places to then being in some very, very light places. And when you posed this question to us and we went away and I went away to sort of look at how I could bring my situations to life for people, I instantly thought of what business leaders are going through now and how they must be feeling and what they're going through. And I then started to think about what the people underneath those people start to feel. And I just simply wrote down on a piece of paper, as goes the head, goes the business. And my story is very similar to Brad and Paul's. It's about divorce, and it's the breakdown of my marriage. And I was flying high at the time at the work, and I was really doing really well. What I didn't realize is how my typical stoic self was affecting other people. And what I would talk about quite a lot when I'm working with my businesses is about the ripple effect that a manager has when they walk into a room. When they walk in a room, they send a ripple right across that room as a manager and a business owner. And that ripple can be either a positive ripple or a negative ripple. And obviously that ripple is going to hit a wall and it's going to bounce back. And it's going to have a double effect on everybody inside that room. So it's really important that, you know, the things we've talked about, the stigma of not talking about things and not opening up to people, etc. It now becomes really important in this world. And I'll say sort of during my marriage, I was flying high in my career. I was all around the country working extremely hard. I was a board director for Computer People. And I'd never really had failure in my life before, and this was the first real big failure, and my inner voices started to kick in and start to really sort of challenge what I was doing, and I felt really sort of lost. And as that typical sort of stoic Yorkshireman, there's a comment in Yorkshire that says "see all, hear all, say nought," and that's what's very much was I was like about my own personal life. However, at work, that say nought was very, very different. at work, I developed a team and developed my success, all about having really clear instruction, constant communication, constant praise, delegation, praise, monitoring people and pushing beyond their boundaries and supporting them. But what I never actually thought about was letting them into my personal life and how my personal life might be affecting them. And I've always lived my life, and I still live my life very much by 3 very simple rules. I lived my life by always try beat what you did yesterday as the first rule. Daily, give it your best. And every day, have fun. And that all means that every day, that if you try and beat yesterday, you're always going to be trying to win. If you're always trying to do your best, it doesn't matter. Some days you might not do very well, but if you're trying to beat yesterday, then you can reset that every single day. And by having fun, you're sort of lightening the load of what's going on from there. But in my sort of breakdown and the divorce, you know, what I found that I was constantly chipping at myself and chipping at my own self-motivation, my own self-drive. I was extremely driven about where I wanted to go. And I think sort of not opening up to people, I was almost embarrassed. I was ashamed of failure. And I didn't really know why. I didn't know really to handle it. And like, you know, Dave was saying there about, you know, the why is it happening to me was really important. And I didn't quite understand why it was happening to me. And I realized later on that I was part of the cause, not the reason why. So I had to sort of address that into my health. But what I did was I threw myself massively into work, and whether it was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, I threw myself massively into work because I saw work as a safe space. But what I didn't understand was my ripple effect that I was having across my team, where I built this really good team and they were doing everything. But what I suddenly found was I was doing everything for my team, and what were they really doing for me? And what were they really helping me? And I found that the relationship was very, very sort of one way. And so what I'd say to managers, you've got to make sure that you create a really good two-way relationship with your team. And the things that changed me and changed me dramatically, well, there was 3 things that sort of changed me. The first thing was a New Year's Eve, a friend of mine who knew one of the few people I confided in at the time, never had confided anybody at the work at this point in time, rang me up and said, we need to go out. New Year's Eve, you're not sitting in on your own. And I was still sort of living in the marital home at the time, and dragged me out. And one person I had confided in at work had rung me up at about 9 o'clock and said, are you out or are you in? I said, I'm actually out, but I'm not really enjoying myself. I'm out with a couple, they're having a lovely time, and I'm just bored and maudlin. And they said, why don't you come down, find us? There's a load of people here. You know, you don't know anybody, so you can sort of just let your hair down a little bit. And so I said to these boss, look, I'm off. I don't want to ruin your night. Went to try and find this other person, couldn't find them. And I ended up walking home on my own in the dark at midnight as all the fireworks are going off. And I had one thought, and it was interesting there listening to the comments at the beginning. I had one thought in my head as a mentor. And the mentor I'd chosen, strangely enough, because I was reading a book at the time on Winston Churchill, was Winston Churchill. And as I walked through this dark wood at midnight on my own, I suddenly thought, I need to do something about this. I can't let this dominate my life. It's dominating everything I do. And then I started to make plans and start to think what I was doing and do what I had to do. And it was the start of the healing process that I started to put a plan into place and put structure into my life of what was going on. So I started to talk about the things that were weighing me down to my friends and to people that were very close to me. And that started to lift a massive amount of pressure that I was feeling. And I started to create a stronger opportunity for myself. And I started to look at to change things. I started to control my own thoughts. And I think it's very important that, you know, your thoughts don't get run away with yourself. I always think there's a perfect you inside that knows exactly what to do. And then there's an imperfect of you inside there trying to chip away at what you're trying to do. And it's who's the battle, who has the strongest voice. And sometimes when you're under stress, that imperfect you becomes really strong and starts to create pillars confounding exactly what you're doing and say, well, that's right, you're rubbish because of this, you're rubbish because of that. And she's looking for the reasons why. And I started to get the perfect me back again and finding the pillars of why I was good at certain things. So I eventually told my boss, and being at the top, as we know, is a very lonely place. I told my boss what was going on. I obviously nodded and confirmed, all right, I wondered why you were a bit quiet, etc. And then nothing more was said. I didn't really get any help. And the second thing that sort of really helped me was, at that point in time at work, I was sent on a course to help deliver certain things, deliver speeches and things like that. And on this course, there was an actor helping you, and there was a psychologist to help. And they gave me a book, and so we want you to choose a picture out of this book, and then we want you to then talk to us and present to us your picture. And I flicked through this book, there's hundreds of pictures in this book, and I found a picture of a beach with a small shack on and a small boat. And the sea was really rough, big dark clouds. And I said, this is what I'm going to talk about. And they looked at me and said, what do you mean? And I went through and described what I was going through in my divorce, that the shack was my little safe haven. The beach is getting washed away, but there's a boat there, and I've got to make a choice now to get inside that boat and paddle into the storm and really create my own future and escape those four walls that were hemming me in, and escape the beach that is stopping me sort of growing and developing. And as I sat there and sort of went through this presentation, what I didn't realize is the effect it was having on everybody else, and the ripple effect you have as a manager as you walk into the room. The lady was crying, the gent was crying, and the counsellor among them said, we're going to stop the session. And we had a whole afternoon just talking about my personal situation, which was very, very cathartic and very, very enlightening to me, and opened up a whole new world of opportunity. And I came away with things thinking, right, I need to set myself a challenge. I can't accept second best, but I need to speak to everybody. And I need to make sure that if I'm engaging with people and I'm engaging with people that I trust, I need to be able to speak to them properly. And yeah, I've been with a beautiful lady for 8 years. We've never had an argument in 8 years because we discuss absolutely everything openly about how we feel, what we're doing, and why we're doing it, and where we're going. And I thought the same thing should be happening at work, that the way you communicate with your staff is really important. And at that time, I chose to leave, and I left, and I felt that my position at the business had changed. I felt that my relationship with my staff had changed, until I resigned, and I sat with my management team and told them I was leaving. And a lot of them were really quite upset about why I was leaving, but they were more upset because they hadn't realized what I was going through and hadn't helped, except one or two of them. And that was a massive lesson to me, that you have to let people in as well as helping them to make sure that you get the two-way street of communication going. So I always found that when I started to look there now, as I move further into the job I'm doing now, I start to look for people who are going through the same situations that I look through, because I could see in the mirror what I was looking like and what they do, so I could help them. And it was interesting when lockdown came, Paul and I had long conversations almost immediately about what we were going to do, what the worst case would look like, what the middle ground would look like, what the best case would look like. And we started talking about plans and executing those plans. We then start to look at what plans that we had. We start to see opportunities. And from the opportunities we've grown bigger plans, and we started to look at certain things. But we both seeked advice about what we should be doing. And so understanding the power of the ripple effect as you walk into the room and you walk out of the room is really important. But what you've also got to understand is the power of the people inside the room and how they can help you and how you can help others. And I think in this modern world, as we're now communicating more over Skype and things like that, sometimes you might be able to not pick up that vibe. So you have to be a little bit more animated with what people over Skype. You have to be more defined in your communication, and you have to do more one-to-ones with your staff to really understand whether they are suffering or not, because sometimes they might not want to open up, but on a one-to-one they might want to open up. But as a leader, you also need to open up about your fears, because they may well help you delay those fears or waylay those fears. And as Dave said, one of the things that helped me through this time was fitness and training. I had a routine, and I loved going into the gym, finding a big heavy bag and thumping the hell out of a big heavy bag and bashing away all my anger and negativity. And as Paul said, one of the things that we try and do constantly is create a positive vibe within our business. And so the rule to me is, as a manager and a leader of a business, be aware of your ripple effect as you walk into the room, and beware of the washback that comes back from it. Because if people aren't with you, then they'll get washed away by your ripple. But if they're with you, they'll swim on that ripple and they'll help each other survive and go forward.
Thank you, Howard. I mean, fascinating, and the ripple effect for the presence of a person in the room, or a manager or owner in the room. Very, very insightful. Thank you. I'm going to turn to Chris to see if he's got anything to add. But specifically, Chris, we've had a question from the audience, or a number of questions from the audience, which is about what's available on websites and apps. And I know that you are in the process of producing with Bradley some videos that we're going to make available to people through the REC website. Also, is there any experience or experience of other websites or apps that people can access to help their teams with mental health? And then finally, after you've spoken, Chris, I'm going to turn to the panelists and just ask them to give one key takeaway to the audience while we do the final poll. So, Chris, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, yeah, the first thing I'd like to say is just, wow. When I talk about role models, there's a room full of survivors that we've heard from, isn't there? The wisdom that we've got from everybody in this room right now is just priceless. So David was talking about living through unbelievable pain, and he's living proof that there's success that comes after grief. And Paul and Howard both spoke about how important communication is, and I truly believe the quality of life and the quality of work, the quality of business is based on the quality of your communication. Howard just shared with us about his personal life affecting those that work for him. And I mean, work and business in 2020, even before this, required just an unbelievable level of resilience. And I tell everyone, the main thing that I tell everyone is the limiting factor on the growth of yourself, the limiting factor on the growth of your business. It's always you. It's always the leader. It's always about your mindset and your skills. And my life has really been about teaching those skills and helping people to change their mindset so that they can achieve whatever it is that they're looking for. And instead of living and being driven by fear, they can produce the kind of results inside themselves that they're looking for. And they really help people to execute and to achieve what they're looking for. Thank you. I mean, what a wonderful experience. But when it comes to websites and apps, yes, absolutely. Now, not everything is for everybody. All right. Now, the NHS has got a tremendous website called Mood Gym. All you need to do is type in into Google there, Mood Gym. So that's one website that's out there and available to you. When it comes to apps, this is what I really mean when I say not everything is for everybody. So you've got innumerable apps available to you to help you meditate, to help you develop resilience. The Headspace app is good. It's not for everybody. The Calm app is very good as well. I think the Calm app gives you a much wider breadth of opportunity to do different types of meditation with different voices, whether it's guided, whether it's just a calming audible noise. There's a really good podcast that I want to guide you to. It's called The Meditation Podcast. That's it. It's a great podcast that you can tune into. There's all different types of meditation every day. So not every day. That would be ridiculous to be putting out as many meditations as that every day. But when they do upload a meditation, they use new technology called binaural beats, which is tremendous. I'm happy to talk about that in another video or another seminar if you want to. There is another really good app called Youper, and it's based on the principles of counseling and CBT, and it's effectively it's a journal, and I've been advocating for many years journaling. This is a particular mental health journaling app. You've got to be comfortable with the information that you're sharing in the app, because they use it, the developers use it as part of their research. So I'm by no means advocating that you just blindly go and use this app. Make sure you understand what is being shared, your data. All of this stuff is very, very important. But the Youper app is a mood journaling app. You're able to select exactly how you're feeling, what's contributing to how you're feeling, and you begin to develop a picture of how you're doing from day to day. So that's another really good one. That's websites and apps for you. Were there any other specific questions around what people were looking for when it comes to apps and websites? And
not specifically, although while you were talking, we've just had a listener ask you, can you just repeat the journaling app for them, please?
Youper. It's spelled Youper. Youper.
Thank you. And thank you, Chris. We've also, just for the audience to be aware, that the recording of this webinar will be on the REC website alongside the other webinars that are recorded so far. Let's go to the next poll. So this is a general poll we like to ask on every webinar. But while you look at that poll, can I go back to Brad and just ask Brad for his one takeaway from what he's heard today?
I don't know if there is just one takeaway, Rich, but the first thing I want us to do is thank my fellow panelists. I think the content today has been outstanding, and the stories that have been shared, I hope will have a level of inspiration to those listening to recognise that it is okay to not quite feel right, and actually sharing, self-reflecting, and being honest with those around you can be super powerful. There is a stigma around mental health, and I understand that, and it's been spoken about in society for many, many years. I think the reason why there's a stigma is because I think people feel that they're going to be judged. It's not the exclusive reason, but it's a big reason. And to Paul's point about surrounding yourself with people that will be positive in your life and a positive influence, those that are judging you really aren't worth worrying about, because ultimately they're not the kind of people you want to be around. I think if we can be open, we can be transparent, people will get to know the real you. That level of authenticity will help in your communications with your personal life, with your business life, with your colleagues, with your clients, and with your candidates. And just to round up, if we look at the title of today's webinar, Strength from Adversity, I think that's such a pertinent title. We are all more resilient than we might give ourselves credit for. And if we dig deep, we'll come through this crisis. And it might not be easy, but there will be another side whereby we can take advantage of at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Bradley. Thank you. Paul, a final comment from yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm going to come back to the points I was making around communication, and Brad's just made that point too. It's extremely important to keep talking, and I think as leaders and as managers, it's absolutely vital that you are heightening your communication with your people, talking consistently with them daily, individually and in groups, and I think importantly, listening to them. I think listening is an underrated skill. It's a rare skill. Most people can talk, but very few people know how to actually actively listen. And I think as leaders, we should be listening far more than we should be talking in some senses, particularly at this stage. But I do think that heightening your communication throughout the business, throughout your organization, and I think within your home, with the people you live with and the people you love, be sure that you are talking constantly, and be kind to each other as well. And I'm picking up Dave's point, very important point, and that is, this is it's a period in our lives. It's not something that's going to last forever. In fact, as we know, nothing lasts forever. Everything is constantly changing. This is quite extraordinary at the moment. But actually, I think, and just coming back to Brad, I think that for a lot of people going through this, in years to come, they'll look back and say that these were defining times for them. This was a moment that helped reshape their thoughts, reshape their views, reshape their direction. And although we don't know that at the moment, you can't say categorically that this is something you'll emerge from feeling better and stronger. I suspect a lot of us will do. So I think remain extremely optimistic, remain very upbeat, because things are going to improve, and take from this period a level of strength that you perhaps didn't realize you had before.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very, very much. Let's turn to Dave to sum up for us, please.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to pass the buck to one of the foremost thinkers and writers of our generation, and leave with some words from him. I'm, of course, talking about Bruce Springsteen, who isn't standing next to me, sadly. But dear old Bruce, one of my heroes, said, the only thing that I'm sure of, the only thing I can really be sure of, is that after all this is over, the world isn't. And he said that on an interview last night on Sirius XFM. And I just thought, that's so important for us, because we've got to get through this. We've got to prepare for what the future looks like. We've got to recover. We've got to bounce back. This, as I said, and as Paul has just said, is just be encouraged. This is a time and a period of our lives with a different rhythm, with some perhaps more sad focuses if there's people that we know that have sadly been taken from us with this disease. So it's just to recognise it's a different time, it's a different rhythm, but we will come back. We will come back stronger as individuals. Hopefully we'll come back stronger as a family unit, and then as a business, and then we'll continue to do better. And hopefully we'll come back in a slightly kinder, more socially aware world as well. So I hope for those listening who may join us next week, you have a good week ahead and a safe week ahead.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. And Howard, your passing thoughts, please, or parting thoughts.
There's been so much spoken about today, and I echo what Bradley said. I think, from a panelist point of view, the information that we've shared and the openness we've shared that information with you has certainly motivated me to really push further forward. And I think I looked at this, and I look at this from a manager's point of view, and I think every business owner, every manager at the moment is carrying the world on their shoulders. And if you're carrying the world on your shoulders, at some point the world is going to crush you, because it's a big, heavy object. So you need to put the world down and take a really good step back so you can see the whole of your world and what your world is actually looking like. You then need to get people around you that can help you move your world forward in the most positive way. And I think from all of what we've talked about today, communication is the key to this, and taking people on your journey and on your mission is key. And as most recruitment leaders, they want to conquer their recruitment world. So if you want to conquer that world, you've got to put that world down off your shoulders and take a step back, look at it, and get people around you, get your team around you to help move that world quickly further forward than you go. But there's so much more that you could take away from today's, and I hope people have learned an awful lot from it. And I wish them all health and happiness, and I look forward to speaking to them next week.
Thank you very much. I have to say, I feel truly humbled to have been part of this webinar. The stories that you've all shared and the experiences that you've all passed on will be invaluable. And for me, I've picked up that mental health is something everybody has, and it's at different stages at different times. But share and seek help when you need it. Try to stay positive and push on, because this will pass. And I'm not going to go on any further, but I'm going to turn the tables slightly. I'm going to read, we've had many quotes come in from the audience, but I'm going to read one to the panelists. And it says, "Thank you very much for sharing all your personal stories. All your advice and guidance is extremely helpful during this time." And I think that's probably the most succinct way of saying thank you to the panelists and thank you to the listeners. And we hope to talk to you next week. Bye-bye.